Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week with an album reaction, which is where we go through an entire album, track by track, exploring what each song does in isolation and it's part of the larger art. Today we're going to be looking at a group called Greet Death. We're going to be looking at an album called New Hell from 2019. We have 9 songs ahead of us, totaling about 48 minutes. Let's dive into this and see what Greet Hell is bringing to the table today. A lot of reverb on the vocals for something so intimate, given the lack of instrumentation here.
I could open my arms, I could just lay.
It's not a bad decision, it's just something I've got to acclimate to. Given how clean the guitar is, I was expecting clean vocals as well. Yeah, the vocals work really well in this setting. That hi-hat work. The nice rhythmic play between the two guitars as well.
If I spilled all my blood, would you still be? When it fills up my lungs, would you shed a tear? I've been left behind. Return to the line.
Interesting idea here where 25% of the phrase is a big moment and then the other 75% is a build-up. Also interesting, the final time through that chorus, we have a 5-bar phrase rather than 4, and it makes it feel like we're lingering in that space for longer than we should before hitting this sort of levity. We have the hi-hat on the offbeats, we have the back and forth on the guitars, the bright tones over here. We still have the bass guitar weighing everything down, but it feels lighter. This doesn't, not anymore, but it did. Okay, interesting moments there. Oh, it's over. Okay, so what I was counting there, or what I was attempting to figure out anyways, is coming in from that lighter section, the post-chorus, into the beginning of this outro, it felt a tad bit longer than it should have been. Maybe 4.5 beats. maybe 5 beats rather than the 4 I was expecting. Granted, I still anticipated the downbeat, but I actually hesitated myself because when I expected to hear some sort of beginnings of sounds, they weren't quite there yet. And when we replayed that next section at the end of the phrase, going back into the loop of it, there's just this ambiguity. The rhythm's gone, there's just some noise, and once again, it feels just a hair bit behind my expectations rhythmically. So I thought, okay, third time around, I'm going to be able to figure it out. Let's count this out. Let's keep a very steady tempo going right here. And the song ends. We don't actually get a third time through. My hypothesis, though, is in those 2 moments, that time slows. It's distorted somehow. Either a reduction in tempo or an increase in the length of the bar. Either way, that moment is longer. Oh, it could also be a fermata. Can't forget about those. Fermata is a very cool technique. It's a little dot with a curve around it. Kind of looks like an eye and an eyebrow. And it means you hang on to this beat until you're ready to move on. That length of time is completely up to the performer or, in larger settings, the conductor. That could be what's going on there too. It is still technically the same tempo, technically 4/4, but a longer 4/4 at the same tempo. Doesn't really make a lot of sense, but it works in practice. So that's interesting because it's another place where there is a lengthening of a feeling. That also happens in the chorus. The chorus is predominantly 4 bars of 4/4, consistently. And then there's just a point when it's 5 bars. It's the very last repetition of the chorus before going into the post-chorus. And most of the chorus is hit it big, bring it down, bring it up, keep bringing it up, hit it big. That's our 4-chord progression. Big, low, rising, rising. Big, low, rising, rising. Except on the last time through, we have big, low, rising, holding, rising. And there's actually an extension of the escalating sound in there. It makes it 5 bars instead of 4. It threw me off the first time through, but the second time through the chorus, it clicked. It's exactly what they're doing. And it's this feeling of holding on to something that's kind of uncomfortable. Maybe it's not holding on, but being stuck within. Either way, as I had mentioned, the post-chorus that comes after this moment is lighter. We have the brighter toned guitar over here giving us this lighter melody on higher pitches. We also have the hi-hat on the offbeats, creating something that's a bit bouncier, something that feels not as pulled down to gravity as much of this track does. Maybe this is the last bit of resistance holding someone or something in this tenser feeling before they burst through. Which makes those moments at the end of the track, I don't know, feel like that is getting a hold again. Everything seems fine, and then you're stuck in this ambiguity. There's no rhythm, there's not really much harmony, it's just kind of texture, it's sounds, it's noises, it's just held out notes with no beat. You kind of lose track of time because the drummer's gone, there's no attacks coming in, there's no way to really tell what the tempo is aside from what your gut remembers from the previous bar. And it just feels like it stretches. You're stuck in here a little longer than you should be. I like how that concept shows up multiple times on this track. The idea of stretching time in order to emphasize a feeling or a place, an atmosphere. It's quite effective both times that it happens. Now the rest of the song is shoegaze. Well, I mean, what we talked about was also shoegaze, but I don't really hear too much in the rest of the track that really stands out to me on a thematic or narrative stance. A lot of it is texture work from the guitars. It creates something that's heavy and frictional, fuzzy, a very staticky sound. We have the bass underneath the whole song that's just creating a really nice foundation. It is a large, meaty tone, but it isn't really punctuated. It's kind of wide and blunt. It just sits on the bottom, supports everything. A lot of pedal tone stuff down there. Just a great way to create a harmonic floor for the song. The drums, aside from that post-chorus, are fairly straightforward. I think that's what makes the post-chorus stand out so much, is because of the offbeat accent on the hi-hat. It just creates something that feels a bit more open than the rest of the song. It's by contrast that it feels important. And for something to be brighter and more interesting, more bouncy, the contrast would have to be more dull, less interesting, less rhythmically pronounced, something that's a bit more in the pocket. The vocals match all of this with a sort of lower energy style of delivery. It isn't saying, I'm not saying that that the vocals don't require any effort, but that they simply come across as sort of just light and ethereal, lots of airiness in it. It's just sort of whatever, man. And shoegaze does a really great job of creating this heavyweight, dense atmosphere and pairing this almost nonchalant, apathetic vocal style with it. And I think that this track is, well, it's falling into that pattern really well and doing a great job at it. Everything in here clicks. It sounds like someone who's been defeated by some sort of weight and that they lack the energy to push forward. But what I love about the chorus is that it tells the story, at least to me, of finding the energy to break out of that. And it's also about the cycles too. I hadn't thought about this either. If the verse is a bit more straightforward, the chorus is this building idea. Heavy impact. Maybe this is a lot of energy. And then you run out of energy. You build yourself back up and you try again. You don't get anywhere, so you drop back down. You build yourself up, you try again. The fourth time through this, though, there's that little bit of extra push. Like I mentioned, it's the threshold. You're right at the cusp of breaking free from this, of finding something brighter. You decide to push through it this time rather than give up, and that's the ripping through this atmosphere into the bounciness of that post-chorus. So yeah, that actually works really well. And I think even that last line in the chorus, during that extended build-up, the vocals come across with a little bit more energy to them. I'm not going to say that it's it doesn't reach the point of like very projected, belted, rock vocals or anything like that, but it does feel like there's more intensity to them comparative to the rest of the track. And I think that's about it for my breakdown on this track then. Functional instrumentation that focuses on atmosphere above all else, vocals that bleed into that atmosphere and help support it. It creates this idea of being weighed down and feeling like you have a lack of energy or possibly agency. And most of the song is about trying to break out of that musically. I'll be interested to see what the lyrics do. Hopefully they kind of line up with some of this, but that's what the music is telling me. I don't have anything to add to the opening, though I do like the album starting off really quiet and intimate, just the guitar, no distortion, no effects, and the vocal alongside it, though I do think the vocals are too loud, too reverberant, too boomy here at this moment. I think they should match the production of the guitars to start the song and then put the effects and layers on it once we get into the song proper. But that's just a personal opinion, a little nitpick there. I don't think it detracts from the song in any way. It just felt a little off and took me a second to adjust to. Let me check out some lyrics for this one. All right, lyrically, we have a little bit of a love song here. I could give you my heart. What would you say? I could open my arms. I could just lay here. Often as I try to keep you off my mind, I would rather die than be locked inside my own hell. This is interesting because the second verse lines up with the first, wondering if there's any sort of spark or connection between these two people. The first one says that I would love to just be here with you. What do you think about that? The second verse then says, if I spilled all my blood, would you still be here? When it fills up my lungs, would you shed a tear? Very dramatic, very emo. Basically saying, how important am I to you? On my deathbed, would you sit by me? But the chorus says a little bit of a different thing here. It says, I try to keep you off my mind, but I would rather die than be locked inside of my own hell. And this is interesting because it implies that this is an unrequited love. Either because the person rejected their offer from the first verse, or because they just haven't expressed themselves to this person. Maybe they're shy. A lot of this is hypothetical. I could give you my heart. If I spilled all my blood, would you still be here? It feels like something, a fantasy that they've crafted inside of their head that they're not able to make a reality. His own hell seems to be a sort of solitude. He has these dreams of being with this other person, and not being with them is a hell to them. Which I think is interesting that they say they would rather die than be trapped in this state. And then their next stanza is, hey, if I died in front of you, would you stay by my side? It's really interesting to bring this up back to back in two very different contexts here. It keeps the theme going along through the track while exploring it in two different perspectives. One being more of a romantic one, and one being more of a depression side of things. Interestingly, the final chorus changes the words up, has a similar effect though. Says, I've been left behind and returned to the grind. If I spoke my mind, I'd be crucified in my own hell. And this is what makes me think that this is all a hypothetical, that he's never even asked this other person if they'd like to spend their life with them, or even just, go. I mean, that second verse though is pretty intense. Hey, you want to go grab lunch? Also, if I spilled my own blood, would you, sit next to me while I go on, while I'm on my way out? Very intense leap from I could just lay in your arms all day to that. A very intense person here. But the final stanza to me shows that they've never even talked to the other person or brought this topic up, and says that they've been left behind, that the opportunity to make this dream a reality has passed them by, but that they think that they would have been in a worse place, crucified in their own hell, if they had ever spoke their mind, if they had ever tried at all. Which is interesting because the music gives me a very different perspective. Even knowing what's going on in this track, I'm not too sure the music tells me that story. I mean, this is a song about getting in your own way, about wanting a dream and being your own hurdle to making it come true. And the song to me is about bursting through. Well, I don't know. That chorus to me is still about building up into energy, failing, trying again until you make it through. That's what the chorus to post-chorus says to me. I can't see that in any other light. The ending, though, does present a darkness of trying to have something a little bit better and being overwhelmed by vagueness, I guess. Vagueness. I'm a poet over here. So there is a bit of failure of returning to something worse there in the final moments of the track. That I can see lines up with the lyrics. But I'm curious if anyone else has a different perspective on that. Does the song say something else to you that might line up a little bit better with the lyrical side of things on this track? All right. Moving on, we have Do You Feel Nothing? We have a couple of short tracks here. Oh, this is interesting. A lot of these tracks are in the 3 to 4 minute range, but we do have a 10 and a 9 on here. Two longer epics against more general length tracks. I wonder, well, let's just dive in. Let's stop wondering about things and just experience. Do You Feel Nothing is the next track. A little bit of positivity. There's definitely momentum to this. Even like this feels like a massive weight off of my shoulders. Is this a different vocalist? Interesting mix between the gritty and the wavy. It's sort of like oil and water for sonic textures, but it works. There's some harmonic instability there. I think this album's gonna go by quick. That song honestly feels like it just started. Kind of neat to hear some light snare rattling going on there. I don't know if the drummer was lightly running a drumstick along it to create some vibrations against the beads underneath, or if it was the vibrations of the amp that was the sound coming out of the amp that was vibrating the beads. But there was a nice rattly sounds in those final 2 seconds. This song's very straightforward. We have chord progressions in the verse and the chorus. We have some catchy vocal lines in the chorus, and we got a bass underneath everything, very pedal tone heavy, and that's about it. We do have some lead lines from both guitars in the verse, but I don't know if I'd call them melody. They're like lead texture. They're not necessarily doing foundational work of playing chords. They're not necessarily in a strict rhythmic pattern either, so it's not really rhythmic information. in that sense, melody is all that's left. I don't know if I'd call them melodies, but they are melodic. They are definitely, though, texture-based, giving us, well, like I'd mentioned in that second verse, a mix of gritty and wavy, like water and sand coming together, but not forming a muddiness, just being sand and water simultaneously. It's really interesting. They're pushed off to far sides, left and right, so there is space between them, which helps that separation. But it's I wonder if this is one thing that really draws people to shoegaze, because this isn't the only band I've listened to that uses multiple effect styles on their guitar, separates them out to the side, two different guitar textures at a given time, and there's something really interesting about them. It's sort of like, I don't know how to describe it. It's not necessarily ear candy, at least not the way that I typically describe that, which is, lots of sounds going off with high quality production to them. It's usually what I call electronic songs that are just new sounds all the time, great production. But there is something fresh about it, something interesting about it. It engages the brain in a similar way to that sort of ear candy composition style and production style, where I'm hearing these sounds and I don't typically hear them together, and it's doing some fun things in my mind. I do think that these two guitar tones are different than the ones we heard in the first track, and I think that they're different from even the chorus of this track. So I hope that we continue to hear more of this. Maybe not a completely new set of ideas for every song, because I think you're going to run out of effects quickly that way. There's only so many different ways you can mix phasers and reverb and waviness and whatever other effects these shoegaze bands use. But it is something I'd like to continue to hear across the album, at least every once in a while. Just these new textures that are very fresh to my ear. So that stood out to me on this track. There's also a different vocalist, I believe. I'm not 100% sure. These vocals are drier, though, than the first song, and kind of what I wanted and in the opening of track 1. So I find that to be really interesting too. I figured that the reverb was just the production they use on their vocals. They slap it on everything, and that part of the song had vocals in it, so it had the big reverb, the massive gain on it. But that's actually not true. They do have vocals with less production on them, so it raises the question even more, why use that heavy reverb and drown out the guitar volume-wise on Circles of Hell's opening? But here we actually have some really nice harmonies going on in the vocals too. I enjoyed that part. But I think what really stood out to me on this track instrumentally is the drummer. We had some really cool syncopation on this, some fun snare work all across this track. It was very momentous. The drummer kept the song pushing forward, even though the atmosphere wanted to be weighty and pull the song down. And the drummer just doesn't allow that. Always having some sort of forward ideas, heavy syncopation, lots of groove. It's sort of a bouncy track if you listen to the snare exclusively. And I think that's really interesting to sneak that into the middle of a song whose atmosphere is so heavy. This is just a song that wants to weigh you down, and so much of it. And the drummer's like, nah, dude, we're going somewhere. Stick with us. So that's pretty cool. And then there's also the end of the song. We have a noisy guitar solo. I don't know what to make of that. I mean, the concept behind this song was, do you feel nothing? That was repeated over and over and over leading up to the noisy guitar solo. Maybe this is a way to create a visceral reaction. It certainly got one out of me. Most of this track, I was like, okay, we got some indie rock guitar chords. We have the compression, the shoegaze effects and layering. bass tone. I'm approaching everything. I don't necessarily want to say passively or unemotionally, but it's definitely sort of just kind of figuring out what's going on and noticing that there's patterns to it all. There's nothing in here that's really surprised me up until that point. And it got noisy, and I was like, dude, okay, this is tense. This is not my cup of tea. I'm feeling things here. And, just 5 seconds earlier, he's like, do you feel nothing? Okay, I feel something now. It's not great. I don't like this sound. It sends shivers down my spine. But I feel something. I wonder if that's what it's about. But I feel like shoegaze as a whole is a very emotive style of music. Even though I don't quite click with shoegaze, at least not this very, I guess you could call it traditional style. None of the writing so far has really surprised me. The sounds of the album so far sound like shoegaze. There's nothing in here that's really blowing my mind there. It feels very iterative, and so I don't really have a lot of surprises on the album so far. The noisiness is a shoegaze quality. I've heard other shoegaze songs with noise elements to them, but I wasn't expecting it here, and not to this level either. That was incredibly dissonant. So I'm kind of glad that exists there, and I'm curious if people who have been emotionally attached to this album so far felt something even stronger from that moment than I did. Let me know down in the comments how you feel about that section. Otherwise, though, I might go look up. I don't like to look into the band until we get a little further into an album, but I have this question just scratching at the back of my mind. What's up with the vocalists? Are there more than one? Is there more than one? Is this vocalist just a chameleon? There's definitely a timbre difference from tracks 1 and 2, but that could be done by the same person. It could be about the shifting effects too. I can't disregard the fact that there's less reverb here. Maybe there's another element that I'm just less privy to, that I can't quite catch by ear, at least on a production side, that could be shifting some of this. I don't think I want to do it yet, but you know what? After track 4, at the latest, I'm going to go look up a personnel list, see if they have multiple vocalists. All right, then. For this one, lyrics. All right, here we have a track about feeling disconnected with those around you and kind of not really feeling anything at all. It says, here comes the sun. I get broken. Here comes the dark to cut me open, to slowly crush it. So we have somebody who doesn't feel like they have a place during the day or the night. They don't feel accepted anywhere. It says, what do I do if I don't feel like getting high again? Getting nowhere and going nowhere. Pure apathy right here. What do I do when that's my life, when I feel disconnected emotionally to everything? The chorus says, I hate my friends because they don't hate themselves, but I want to be like them. I don't want to talk, I don't want to think about my days, but I will waste them all because I feel boring. And what do I do if I don't feel like getting well again? When the apathy kicks in so hard, it removes your motivation to get out of your apathetic state. Yeah, this is about somebody who feels cold. They don't feel like they have a place anywhere. They don't feel like they have a connection to anyone. They have people in their life, sure, but that's about as far as that statement goes. What do you do when your life is like this? That's what the song poses. No answer for it. In fact, it seems to be requesting an answer. This is my life. Where do I go from here? That's a powerful it's a powerful statement to put into a song. From here, we're going to go into the track Let It Die, which I don't know if that is an answer to the question, but let's find out. This is the shortest one on the album, not even breaking 3 minutes long.
I'll embrace all the consequences of the things that I do when I let it die, let it burn when it fades and returns, knowing I never let it die, let it burn, let it die, let it burn when it fades and returns, knowing I let it die, let it die, let it die.
All right, pretty straightforward song here. We got some traditional blues going on. We have 3 guitars, bass, all doing foundation here, just getting chordal information from them all, though we do get rhythmic information. I wouldn't call them rhythmically oriented. But we do have that dun dun da dun da dun dun da dun da dun, laying down that general 3/4 beat. The drums come in and accentuate this, and then we have the vocals on top of it with what sounds like just 2 ideas. We had a slower concept at the beginning of the song. I'm going to assume that was a verse, and then we hit the chorus, which is the da da da, that part, which we repeated a lot. I don't know how many repetitions were in there. That took up a majority of the track. That's it. That's the whole song. What I think makes this stand out a little bit, though, is the general aesthetic of it. I really like the heavy compression on the drums. They almost sound like they're coming out of an old-timey radio. The guitar also has a bit of compression and lower fidelity presence to it. And the vocals have a mid-fidelity element to them, but what's most interesting here is that it's double-tracked with imperfections. That is to say that this vocalist recorded the line twice, but it's only like 95% similar. So there's going to be harmonic distortion there, where the 2 pitches aren't perfectly in line. One might be just a few cents sharper or flatter than the other vocal line, and that's going to create some dissonance in the tracks. But also there's a couple of cases where you can hear the beginnings of syllables and the endings of syllables done differently, maybe holding on to a C sound or an S sound at the end of a word longer than the other side does it, maybe coming in just a little bit early. And so you have this schism, almost a division of 2 sides that are almost in sync, but not perfectly in sync. And this schism here adds to the sort of distance that the main guitar and the drums have. They feel compressed and an older style, lower fidelity than the guitars that come in on the sides, which are brighter, cleaner, and clearer. This is another level of production schism going on here, and this entire song feels like a division. 2 people, 2 ideas, 2 concepts, 2 whatever, almost on the same path with each other, but not. There's something that separates them. That's what this song mostly says to me. It takes some ideas that we haven't heard elsewhere on the album and runs with them in order to create this feeling of division. Let's hit some lyrics. Well, there's no division in the lyrics here. There's a little bit of division. It's about somebody who has aspirations, they aspire to do things, aspirations, and they don't. It says, I had a dream, but I let it die. I'll embrace all the consequences of the things that I do when I let it die. So basically saying, I wanted to do things, but I don't. I don't ever push for them, and they just kind of sit there at the back of my mind, fading and decaying, and I embrace, not even deal with, but I embrace with everything that comes from that decision, or maybe in another way from that inaction. Says it fades and returns, knowing that I'll never learn, so I let it die. They feel like they're just never going to complete anything in life. They're never going to amount to anything because they can't want to. I don't know. Maybe it's just this apathy. Maybe this entire thing is about dealing with depression. I think all three tracks so far have done a pretty good job of focusing on different ways that depression can negatively affect someone's life. How apathy and inaction can lead to missing opportunities of, just, do you feel nothing? It's a general concept of feeling numb. I think that's a very clear case of saying that song's probably about depression. But also tracks 1 and 3 are about missed opportunities due to not taking action on things that you'd want to get done. That's also a side effect of depression. The album is called New Hell. Maybe that's what this is all about. Let's dive into one of the longer tracks here. It's called You're Gonna Hate What You've Done. Does not sound like doesn't sound like we're pulling out of this negative funk that we're in. Let's dive in. I am curious what they're going to do with a double-length track, though. Because so far the songs have been very focused. I don't know if that would work for 9 minutes. I'm hoping for a little bit more variety on this track. This one's more pensive than the other tracks. The lower tempo and pretty straightforward drum work give it more of this fixation feeling. little bit of a twanginess on the bass there.
Well, the days are
Pretty cool duet there.
getting shorter.
all your friends start
Coming over.
and you lose it.
You're
I like all the little additions the drummer does. Sometimes we get multiple cymbal hits. There's some ghost notes on the snare every once in a while. It adds a little bit of character to a otherwise rather straightforward drum pattern. A lot of this song, the guitars have just been chord outlining, chord shaping. So we had a duet earlier, now we're looking at a solo. This solo guitar has a lot more presence than the other two did. But it's a similar guitar riff, right? At least I think it kicked off similarly. The end was certainly unique, so it went in a different direction, if nothing else, than the previous duet did. This was an interesting track. Landing on a ton of dissonance, only amplified by the effects of the guitar. So we have something here that's a cool little mix of ideas. It certainly is shoegaze. I think in most of the texture and production elements of it, we do enter into a tad little bit of noise rock there at the end during all of the feedback prior to the outro. But there's also a heavy dose of blues in here, which is very cool, coming off of Let It Die, which introduced the bluesier chord progressions into the vocabulary of the album. So that when we come here, we can return back to a sound that's familiar to the opening tracks while exploring a harmony that's more based off of where we just came from. Great way to pace this all out. I'd say these opening 4 tracks are really well done in setting up expectations, expanding upon them in different directions, and bringing it all together here at the midpoint of the album. Fantastic, honestly. But what I find really interesting about the blues and indie rock elements is that one doesn't replace the other. There is certainly a lot of bluesy elements in here, but even during the guitar solos, you can hear how the melodies tend to lean into blues a little bit while still embracing that indie rock root. It's more of adding blues as a spice once we hit the midpoint of the song and really begin to engage with that shoegaze element again. I think this is where the song really stands out for me, is this joining of 2 different harmonic patterns, 2 different focuses on atmosphere and emotion, and finding what works between them and really leaning into that place where they overlap. It allows this song to stand out amongst other shoegaze songs that I've heard, while also just being incredible in the emotional delivery by itself, not even within the conversation of the genre. This is just a really solid track. I really like how all that comes together. And here's the conditional statement here. It's kind of long for me. I'll agree, though, that this track does a fantastic job with its length. I think the pacing is generally good, but there are a couple of places where I was just kind of waiting for what would happen next. I found the beginning of the song to be a bit slow. The opening 2 or 3 minutes kind of took its time, but I think a lot of that is just the hyper focus of what it's doing. The back half of the track, or I guess the last 60% of the song, is this gradual rise of intensity. We start off with the lighter, chiller duet, then we introduce a more shoegazy atmosphere, and then we put a solo on top of that, and that solo has the larger guitar to it, and then we bring in more textures and more layers to another atmosphere. Then we put another solo on top of that, which devolves into noise and feedback and chaos. It is this gradual rise in layers and intensity and volume and complexity. In sounds, the opening duet is kind of light, not just in how many layers are there or the tones of the instruments, but also in the complexity of the music. Despite having 2 guitars, this is one of the simplest forms of this lick that we're going to hear. As we increase intensity and get through more and more solos, they become more complex. They have more shreddy adjacent elements to them. It really is a fantastic escalation across a constant evolution of sound, a continuous exploration of this atmosphere and finding what's really at the heart of it. Kind of getting gists of it at the beginning and finding out how that's expanded upon and what it leads to when we reach the core of it at the end. It's all done really well. And I was kind of glad that they went in this direction. Granted, it's not a track I think I'd listen to again on my own. Do You Feel Nothing would probably, well, no, Circles of Hell is probably my favorite track so far. But I do really appreciate the artistic side of this, the narrative that it tells, the way that it explores that, and the fact that, as I mentioned when the song started, 9 minutes is twice as long and even 3 times as long as the tracks we just finished listening to. What are they going to do with the extra time? They turned it into a slow burn. Not a traditional slow burn either. One with exponential jumps rather than linear ones. I think it uses its time wisely, and it's not a song that, normally I'd listen to something like this, and I'm like, we probably could have cut this down a little bit, maybe, combine some of the ideas and instead of staggering them, and that would have improved the pacing. I don't really think there's anywhere in here I would change. It's not that it moves slowly. I think the slowest part is the opening, the vocal parts before we get to the instrumental work. And I don't know, every second of that was used for vocals. I don't know how you would really tighten that up much other than increase the tempo, which I thought the slower tempo really worked to create this feeling of dragging that allows us to, when we reach the back half of the track, find a way to even increase that. The intensity isn't just the layers and composition. We also get faster in contrast to how we start. So it's all meticulously composed with a plan in mind. There's nothing that I can really dislike objectively about it. It's really good art. There were moments when I found myself wondering what comes next, ready for it to happen. I was done with the section we were in, and that's on me completely. That's not a jab at the art itself. I do think we heard more than one vocalist in this track, though. I heard 2 distinct timbres back to back, but there's a lot of space between them too, where we would get a couple of words and then like a bar and a half, and then more words, but it was always with a pitch shift as well. And it makes me wonder if their head voice just is a bit more pointed and nasally than their chest voice, which is pretty common. But this feels like it's done to an extreme. It almost changes the shape of the tone in a way that feels like a distinct other person. But given that it's always with a pitch shift, it makes me wonder if, I keep going back and forth on this. There's definitely 2 timbres in play. I don't know if it's 2 people or not. But I did say after this track, I'm going to look that up. So let me hit some lyrics and a personnel list. All right. It looks like that while the band is a 5-piece outfit today, that under this album, they were only a 3-piece outfit. We have Logan, Harper, and Jim. Jim plays drums, Logan and Harper do vocals and guitars. At least that's their personnel list for their current album. There's no personnel list on the album we're listening to right here, at least not with the instrumentation next to them. It just says that these 3 people are Greet Death. So my hypothesis, I suppose, is going to be that since Logan and Harper both do vocals, that's probably what I'm hearing then. Makes me wonder who plays the bass, though. Maybe it's one of them, probably. I don't know. Let's see here. Lyrics for this. This is a song about making bad decisions and regretting them later. That's the whole phrase there. You're going to hate what you've done. That's the chorus, by the way. You're going to wake up the sun and you're going to hate what you've done. The idea of waking up the sun is interesting. It's more that the sun typically wakes you up, but I think the general idea here is that when the next day comes around and you realize what you did yesterday, you're not going to feel great about it. We have somebody, though, who tries to avoid the day. Says that I'm awake for the midnight howl and the coyote croon. I'm awake when I meet the devil crawling in my room. So we have somebody who avoids the day, sleeps during the day, and is awake at night. The second verse, though, says, embracing the final glimpse of a blood-red moon, while lately I've been cheating with the devil in blue. So we have red versus blue here, some color opposition, but cheating on the moon with the devil in blue. I'm not entirely sure what that's supposed to represent. Says, well, maybe if he cuts me loose, I'll get my days in hell back too. Maybe I'll keep dreaming if I'm dreaming of you. So once again, we have somebody who makes the narrator's life easier or more comfortable. It's a positive light in their life. But it also seems to still be in the dreams, in the mind. Regardless, the end of the track says the days are getting shorter and your friends stop coming over. You're losing your composure. We should sleep less and talk more. The idea generally being here that it feels like time is running out. We need to make the most of our time. Maybe sleeping all of the time isn't great. Maybe we can do something more productive with those hours. I'm not entirely sure what's going on in this track, but it does bring up a devil twice, sleeping at night or being awake at night multiple times and regretting your decisions yesterday while wanting a better future tomorrow and not really feeling that that's going to happen. It's another not apathetic element, but it isn't hopeful or positive about what the future will hold, which is pretty consistent with the other tracks on the album. All right, time for a shorter one here. This one's called Entertainment.
I think I might go for a swim under the lake where the cold lives, and shiver while the factory flames.
Much like the opening of track 1, just guitar and vocals, very intimate. Vocals are loud, guitar is simple and chord-based.
And maybe there I'll take
Just have these eighth
your
notes,
hand
harmonic
down
information,
in
very
the
functional,
dark where I
very foundational.
And we can talk about your friends, anything but what we're becoming. I wonder what the park where we swim looks like at night when it's abandoned. And if when no one's listening,
So coming off of the heightened complexity, noise, layering of the last track, we're kind of mellowing out both in tone and composition.
because no one needs entertaining. I think I could go back again. I think I could change how I feel there. We can call up all your friends when we're finally
interesting how empty it sounds with just the bass, without the accompanying guitars to fill the space to create that wall of sounds. Despite how large this instrument is, it feels empty, it feels lonely compared to this. That's the second and half, I'll explain the half in a second, time that we've had a longer, drawn-out, feedback-based ending. Do you feel nothing wraps up that way and you're going to hate what you've done? It kind of goes in that direction, but we do have a proper outro at the end of that track. But I did think we were just going to have a long feedback outro on that song because it did last for a good 30 or 40 seconds before the proper outro of that song kicked in. That's definitely a way they like to end tracks. It provides a little bit of finality as a concept slowly fades out over time, but it also creates noise. It creates a drone. I think that works really well because a lot of this seems to be lyrically, thematically similar. It ties all of these ideas together as something that is perpetual, continues on. Not necessarily something that goes away or has a proper ending. It comes back in different ways, different sounds, different types of feedback, but it always comes back. This is a rather straightforward track, though I don't have a lot to add to this. I simply wanted to take a moment here to quickly go over it and then discuss lyrics, since we're going to head into two longer tracks in a row, and I didn't want to forget anything about this one, or just forget to talk about it in general. This song simplifies everything. We have a chord progression. That's the whole thing for the guitars and bass. Even when we get the guitars on the side, frequently in the verses, we will hear different things between them. The textures will clash or work together. Maybe they'll have different lines. Nothing melody driven, but sometimes semi-melodic. Some sort of movement to them beyond basic foundational writing. That's not what we get here. This is a pretty straightforward pop rock track, like a pop rock ballad, actually. It's kind of generic, lower energy, sorrowful chord progressions. The instruments are big, fuzzy, lots of power to them, or lots of size to them, but not a lot of power. They're kind of lacking in that. They fill the space, but they feel lackluster. And then it's just chords, man. The bass, we get pedal tone. The guitars, we get the chords. A very simple rhythm structure as well, either quarter notes or eighth notes, all of it straight, no syncopation, no swinging of any of it. Even the vocals are rather low energy, low syncopation, very straightforward rhythmically. It's a song that sort of just is the minimum needed to craft a song. There are chords, there are melodies, there is a beat. I like how it reduces all of this. I was talking about the pacing of the first four tracks, but this is phenomenal too. We reached a crazy peak there at the end of track 4. This mellows it out. The pendulum has swung in the complete opposite direction. We've removed complexity, we've removed intensity, we've removed noise in favor of something incredibly palatable and mainstream. At least compositionally, there still is that shoegaze grit to it that might not be as mainstream as, like radio rock or something like that. It's a little bit more pushing away from that. But compositionally, this is pop rock right here. This is a straightforward pop rock ballad, and it's any other place in the album might have been a little not confused by it, but maybe a little less receptive of it. But it is a perfect place here to sort of subvert all of their writing techniques and go for something this simple, because we're swinging from basically the other side of the spectrum. We did get to hear very clearly the vocal harmonies here. That was pretty cool. Glad I finally got to hear both of the vocalists at the same time, and I can hear a timbre difference between them. It's really interesting how close their timbres are, though. So that's kind of neat. One of those cases where two people come together to create art, and it's just like a perfect sonic pairing. So that's cool. Nothing else to add to this one, though. Let's hit some lyrics. Interesting track here. We kick it off with, well, kind of like the red versus blue thing earlier, another very direct comparison. It says, I think I might go for a swim under the lake where the cold lives and shiver while the factory flames dance like specters by the highway, creating a very distinct division between above the water and below the water. With below the water being cold, depression is frequently in pop culture described as a type of drowning. So I think it's interesting that we're using water to describe this feeling while also embracing the coldness of that. What's interesting then is that it's also described as dark. It says, maybe there I'll take your hand down in the dark where I feel nothing, bringing back lines from track 2, which is interesting because track 4 alluded to track 3 lyrically as well. So, what was it? Track 4 also mentioned about personal hells or circles of hells or something, which calls back to track 1. So there's quite a bit of lyrical callback going on this album. Anyway, he says, we can talk about your friends, anything but what we're becoming. So we'll talk about whatever you want except for the reality of life right now. Then talks about childhood. It says, I wonder what the park where we swing looks like at night when it's abandoned, and if no one listens and all the creatures, when no one's listening, all the creatures are silent because no one needs entertaining. That's an interesting line. I wonder if it's the creatures of the world or the creatures of the mind. I don't know. Regardless, it feels like a want to go back to easier days when times made sense, when you just went to the park and swung with your friends. Once again, trying to talk about anything other than what we're becoming, what is happening right now. The finale of the song says, I think I could go back again. And I could change how I feel there. And then we can call up your friends where we're finally together. And that's repeated over and over and over. This idea of being part of a larger group. We're finally together. This idea of finding your place somewhere. Being with people, not being alone. There's also a little bit of regret in here too, which I think is interesting because that does line up with a lot of the lyrics. Missed opportunity. What if I hadn't have done that? What if I could go back and change how I feel there? What if I'm less apathetic? What if I'm more driven? What if I made a change that allowed me to be part of your life? And we could all be together today instead of the way that we are, separated. Once again, it's wishful thinking. It's a dream that's impossible to have. All right. Yeah, this album is certainly focused. Musically, definitely a shoegaze album. Each track kind of has a little bit of its own vibe, which I'm digging. But lyrically, it's also incredibly focused. It has its themes. It has its recurring motifs and ideas. And it's focused on them. It's making sure that everything feels like it's connected, that these songs, musically and lyrically, are supposed to be connected. You're supposed to enjoy this whole thing as, a full artwork rather than individual tracks. That's not to say that I don't think they work as individual tracks. I think every song we've listened to, other than Let It Die, could be a pretty good single. But it definitely is something that each song is part of a larger whole. It's all in conversation with itself. You don't always get that with albums, especially outside of concept albums. And I think it's really impressive to see the work being put in here to tie everything together. All right, next up is Strange Days.
Said she won't give up on you yet. What's the use of going on when you're heartless? Wanted sickness, wanted death, now you've got it. Said you should start making sense. Now you're blue, but you've got nothing to prove it. Just the symptom of the young and the youth.
A little bit of an alt rock bouncing back and forth idea there.
Leave me weak and straight. Said you've got no more loose ends.
Was that a pre-chorus that didn't go to a chorus?
Running out of friends here.
Interesting.
Too long trying to bring back the good years. That's when we were sweet like them. Wanted love, but we didn't.
Got the little syncopated riff over here.
And now all we seem to love is the darkness. Strange days where the dead boys play. We all wait. Lovers bend and break.
I think that is the chorus.
Love is the darkness.
Interesting.
And now all we seem to love is the darkness. And now all we seem to love is the darkness. And now all we seem to love is the darkness. And now all we seem to love is the darkness. And now all we seem to love is the darkness.
A little bit of syncopation on the snare, but this is a very focused section. This very rigid rhythmic ideas, chords only. All right. Not... This song takes Entertainment's idea. Simple composition. Chords, simple, straightforward rhythm, and melody. And runs with it in a very simple way. I think that Entertainment had a little bit more expressiveness to it that I don't really see here. Well, as far as I can tell, over half of this track is the big, massive guitar tones, 4 heavy chords, and something about we love the darkness or something like that. It turns it into a mantra of sorts while accompanied by this incredible weighty wall of sounds. That's the entire song. Even prior to that, we didn't see too much rhythmic diversity. We had a little bit of syncopation in the guitar, but it was still kind of locked into quarter note ideas or eighth note ideas in the first half, actually. And bass, guitars, all singular. We don't have a division of writing. We do have a division in tone, as usual, but not in writing. The bass is pedal tones. We don't have a third center guitar that does counterpoint or anything like that. It's a stripped down version of what we had seen elsewhere in the track. We do have this interesting duality. The lighter, quieter part versus the heavy, larger part, and then the little quieter part and the larger, heavy part. We had this neat back and forth on the verses. The choruses are lackluster. I didn't even know it was a chorus the first time. I honestly thought it was a pre-chorus. It felt like it was building into something, and then we just went back to a verse. I was like, oh, next time we're going to build into the chorus. And then we didn't. We extended what I thought was the pre-chorus, and then that took us to the outro. I didn't know it was the outro at the time, but it took us to the final 3 minutes of this song and that heavy repetition. So the chorus ends up kind of falling flat for me. But I think if we change the way we think about this, or at least if I change the way I think about it, we can find something really neat here, in that the verse seems to be trying to get into this, kind of like trying to start a lawnmower, right? And that didn't do it. So you try it again. So we have the quiet part. It gets to the loud part. We want to be loud. The song wants to be loud. It wants to end loud. It wants to get there, and then it doesn't. So you try again. No, that doesn't work either. You try again, and it stays there for a little bit. You think you got it. Then the engine stalls, and we drop back down. That was the little pre-chorus thing. We do this through the verse again, and when we hit the pre-chorus thing, this is the energy that holds us into the outro. In a sense, that might actually be a pre-chorus, with the outro being the chorus just repeated 8 times or something like that. It went on for so long. And it could be seen as a song trying to get into this state. Now, I don't know that the lyrics are going to support that, but I only picked up one line, half of it at that. It doesn't seem like a positive take. I don't know why I would want to read this song as trying to get to a state of mind, given what I think that state of mind is going to be, but that's the only way I can really interpret this. And I think it does a great job of that, of teasing this sound and eventually getting into it and having it dominate the rest of the track. But it's a very straightforward song, this one. And yeah, I don't have much else to say about that. My best interpretation of this is it is another song about waiting too long to act. The first 2 verses speak about kind of being in a negative state of mind. Maybe even having depression affect your relationships with people. Said she won't give up on you yet, but what's the use of going on when you're heartless? Said you should start making sense, but now you're blue. You've got nothing to prove it. It's just a symptom of the young and the useless. So that idea of feeling blue but can't prove it, that's depression right there. But he says that it's just a symptom of the young and the useless. I think that's interesting, that depression falls on those, or at least on this person, when they have nothing to distract them. It says, long days leave me weak and strange. Now, interestingly, this is where we start pushing into the feeling of time has passed us by. It says, you got no more loose ends. We should leave because we're running out of friends here. We've spent too long trying to bring back the good years. That's when we were sweet like them. We wanted love, but we didn't love ourselves, and now all we seem to love is the darkness. We all waste, lovers bend and break. And then a repetition of now all we seem to love is the darkness. We had a chance to get out, of having a bright future, of enjoying positivity in our life, and we chose not to. We've become bitter by staying here in this place rather than growing or moving or evolving or whatever movement means figuratively here. We've rotted, we've wasted. Now we can't do anything but embrace that rot. Now all we seem to love is the darkness. Once again, an opportunity for good has passed us by. Now here what I think is interesting, and it has shown up a couple of other times, but it's not a consistent thread, is that this doesn't seem to be a truly objective statement. There is always time for change. It's never too late to become a better person, to change your outlook, your perspective on life, to change your physical location to somewhere healthier for you. But as we've seen in a couple of tracks, they feel like that time is behind them. In some cases in this album, it is true that they missed a specific moment. You cannot go back in time to change that, but not every feeling of missed opportunity, I think, is permanently gone, although this album does fixate on that idea. It also seems that there was a person in their life. She said she won't give up on you yet. Said that you should start making sense. Said that you've got no more loose ends. Finally, the fourth verse doesn't start with something that she said. The narrator says that's when we were sweet like them. That person's not in the picture in this final verse. If verse 3 was the last thing we heard from them, and they said, we need to get out of here. There's nothing tying us to this area anymore. We need to leave. I wonder if they did leave, and now that this person is alone, adding to their depression, adding to that darkness that surrounds them. After all, it says we waste, lovers bend and break, relationships fail. Interesting. Because once again, it's inaction. An opportunity was presented, they chose not to act on it, and as they've said multiple times on this album, I will reap the consequences of my inaction, or of what I don't do. I don't remember what the phrase was exactly, but they understand that there's consequences to them not taking these opportunities, and we continue to see that acknowledgement almost across through this entire album. It's an interesting bit of self-reflection I don't think I always see in stuff like this, where there is, sure, an acknowledgement that I need help. They actively mention depression, apathy, lethargy, a lot of elements that are, symptoms of depression. They probably do need help from a doctor, maybe drugs, whatever will help them get through it. But they also acknowledge that part of it is just themselves too. They could be taking these opportunities and they're not. And it's not completely blaming one thing. They're taking a little bit of blame for it themselves. The issue I think I take with that is that particularly in this album, it seems to be focusing on a lack of self-confidence, a way of putting the self down. It's not so much of I could be better or I could do better if I just, accepted these opportunities and tried. It's more of I deserve this because I did nothing. And it just goes into that self-pity element. And on the one hand, that's incredibly realistic. Depression absolutely intertwines with self-pity, and it is a spiral that just drags you down. But on the other hand, I look at this as art that can influence people. And at least so far, this isn't fair. I was going to say so far, it doesn't seem to have any sort of positive messaging here. I don't think it's fair to put that at the feet of these artists. And I was going to say that they sort of have an obligation because of the structure that they've set up thematically to not make it seem cool's not the right word, but fine for self-pity to be the way of approaching this. But I don't think that's fair to them. I don't think it's fair to art in general. So I don't want to go in that direction. I think that much like, I'm going to be upset because I can't remember that album. Album reactions. What album was this? Sufferer. I think this is going to be in that same realm where it's more of just an honest representation of dealing with a mental illness like this, of dealing with depression, more so than an album that's supposed to help people get through it. I don't think it's supposed to be an album that is something to live by, to craft an identity around. I think it is something just to see oneself reflected in. And that's even kind of ignoring the fact that it might just be an outlet for the artists themselves. They're feeling this way, they need to get it out, they make an album. Maybe not even considering or thinking about how an audience is going to react to it. It might just be an outlet for them to help get through these dark times, to just put these feelings into words and sound, and maybe that helps them get through their own lives. So, yeah, I'm kind of glad we had this discussion. I'm not too proud of how we got here, but I think it is important, especially as somebody, a critic who is in front of a camera, who has an audience, to kind of show where self-reflection helps with things. Like even right here, I was about to go into a direction and caught myself like, no, I don't want to do that. Even though that's where my brain went, I actively stopped myself from going in that direction. And I think it's just good to show fallible people. We don't see enough of that on the internet. That's for sure. So, all right, that's where I sit with Strange Days then. Next up, we have Strain. Let's see what's going on with this track.
The phantom of
This is slow. What's our tempo here?
creeps around like a shadow.
77-ish, maybe? Got a nice adagio feel right here.
I was possessed
the album started off rather intense and heavy, and we kind of let that fade away for a little bit in the middle here. I mean, even this was almost 90 seconds of very introspective, what's the word I want? Intimate sound, just instrument and vocals. I like that riff there. The bass kick and the snare so prominent against the nothingness in the center here. Because we have our ride cymbal all the way off to the side and bass sort of center left here. So when the vocals aren't present, that bass kick and snare really impacts the feeling of this center weight. That little bit of grit as a pickup note is a phenomenal choice. Interestingly, there is some levity to the vocal melody here. Right there, it kind of lands in this, I don't know, calm tone. It's quite distinct from the chord underneath, and of course the sound of these instruments just being this massive weight. That one moment, it's just, like 2 beats of calm. I love the bend on the second note. That third chord is stark. Oh, we don't get the downbeat. Okay. Okay. So, another straightforward track. I feel like there were more specifics, more ornamental ideas I could bring up at the beginning of this album. And somewhere around track 4, 3, somewhere in there, we've really begun to focus on a streamlining of sound, kind of getting rid of any ornamental or complex ideas in order to focus on very straightforward composition. You're going to hate what you did is, wait, what's it called? You're going to hate what you've done. That's what it is. I was like, that doesn't sound right. That song, I think, shifted us back towards a side of complexity with the entire back half of the track. And since then, we have really streamlined this album down into chords, quarter notes, and melody. And that's really it. And this song falls in line with that. But what I think this song does really well, and the album has been doing well as well, but I just don't connect with that in this sort of environment easily, is the emotional side of things. This song absolutely screams to me of pain in a way that the rest of the album, I don't know that I felt it. It might be there. But I mean, if you're new to the channel and you've made it this far, you probably have caught on. I kind of take more of an analytical approach to things, trying to figure out why in the composition or in the lyrics, the song is doing what it's doing, what we might be able to discern from that, why the emotions hit hard, what is the compositional component that adds to the effectiveness of the art. When you're completely in that analysis mode, like I am in these situations, and sort of how I've been trained over the years, unknowingly, if I have lights in my face, it's very hard for me to get into an emotive style of musical understanding. I've even noticed this in my more casual reactions that I've started doing recently, which are still very analytical, simply because it's still the computer in front of me, webcam, lights. I think that kind of affects my mental state now that I'm thinking about it. But it's not impossible for me to feel emotional weight in music either, even away from an analytical form of, oh, those were sad chords, so obviously this is a sad song. But coming at it from a very heart-based focus, this song hit me. And it really was that final guitar lick, that I love the movement of it. It's that second note bend. It kind of comes under and scoops back up. It plays around with not just the shape of the sound, which kind of feels like it's fluctuating between wider and thinner tones, but I also think that there's some pitch shifting in there too, scooping just below the intended note and coming back up and hitting it exact. All of it is incredibly human. There's so much emotion in that. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, okay, that's a cool lick. They're playing it again. They're playing it again. And normally this type of repetition, it wears me down. I don't normally like it. But here I find it to be incredibly effective. It is a mantra, a focus of intent, but instead of being a lyric said over and over for emphasis, it's a musical lick. It is the sorrow of this. It is a very bluesy lick that only adds and embellishes to the emotional resonance of it, but it's really leaned into. That second note is the tense one, and it is what all of your focus is brought in on. To repeat this over and over feels like a cry of pain, but it's not in the traditional way of, hey, let me make my guitar wail using, the whammy bar or something like that. No, this feels like a musical representation of the way pain feels. Not the crying that we use to show we're in pain, but the actual pain itself, that feeling in your gut, that pit in your stomach. That's what it feels like. And that grabbed me. And when that note leaned into where the next riffs, well, the riff continues on, but we change chords. And so the three notes that we're playing are shifted as well. And it just smoothly moves into that. And that just felt great. We did that 4 times. And then it transitioned into this incredibly tense, harmonically unstable section. This whole thing feels destructive. I really like this. I don't know what this song is about, but I assume we're going to be looking at lyrics that are similar to the themes we've been exploring. And talking about strange days, I had brought up the idea of rot, of internal rot, of being in a place of darkness for so long that it's all that you can imagine anymore. The repeated lines at the end of the song of now all we love is darkness or something along those lines fits really well with this feeling right here of destruction. The sorrow, the pain, all of it is feeding in and in on itself. And when that's your only reality, it becomes normal. And if you allow that to become normal, it is going to eat at everything. And that's what this moment feels like, where the pain isn't something healthy anymore. It is normal to feel grief or sorrow or any of these, but when it becomes everything, that's when you become numb. That's when it begins to destroy your sense of emotion, of normalcy. I really feel like that's what's going on there. And for it to feel the way it does, and for me to be able to support it musically, saying, hey, here's the theory behind it, but also to feel that in the moment, in an environment I don't always emotionally click with music. I have nothing but utmost positive words to say about that final moment of the song. And I'm glad too, because I don't really have a lot to say about the rest of this track. As I mentioned, this album's really focusing down here, kind of coming down to simpler ideas and focusing on emotion and atmosphere over all else. So to have that moment, it made the whole song worth it, because I do think it was starting to wear on me a little bit. It is 6 minutes of 2 ideas. Kind of stretching it just a hair bit, but it ends up working. It caught me off guard, brought my defenses down, and then went right for the heart. And dude, was it effective. 100%. Now, the other thing that I want to focus on that I kind of brought up a couple of times here, but haven't really made a moment to talk about, is contrast on this album. We have talked a little bit about rising and falling action across the album. Some songs being higher energy, others being lower, and how it's creating a really nice pacing and flow through the entire artwork. But there's also the individual flow of songs. Pretty much every track has a low energy and a high energy section. Usually something that's a bit more spacious. It might still have a lot of layers to it, but there's just room to breathe. And then there's the wall of sound, which is where the guitars kick into ridiculous overdrive and fill up every space with fuzz and white noise alongside the drums and everything else. This song, I think, continues to follow in that pattern of doing a really great job of bouncing between the two. But it is something that I think is helping with the songs as well. The album feels like it's paced well, but so do the songs. There isn't a single track in here that I don't feel has gone by in a blur. I mean, honestly, we have 13 minutes of music left, a quarter of the album left, give or take. And it doesn't feel like we've been doing this for, 2 hours. Yeah, dude, I would have, if you had asked me, I'd be like, yeah, we're probably at like 75-minute mark. This is going to be a short video. No, this is actually right on par. About 2.5 hours seems about normal for an album review. And it doesn't feel like that though. This album is just, the tracks go by so fast. So I think a lot of that comes down to the pacing, the flow, and the high dynamic contrast, not just between all of the tracks, but in the moment to moment on the songs. And it's all done in a way that supports the feelings within too, that the lower parts feel like isolation. They feel like moments to breathe. They feel like spending time in your thoughts, and how all 3 of those can push into a heavy weight of depression and lethargy and regret and sorrow and pain. It's not just done for compositional contrast because music is best when there's highs and lows. No, it's actually thematically relevant to the album. I think they do a great job of bringing that all together, including not even just having sharp transitions. Sometimes we do, but sometimes we build into the highs as well and we fade out into the lows. And I would wager, given how strong the compositional themes have been on the album that I've picked up on, I'd wager that if you look at when we shift from low to high or high to low starkly, just like we were doing this and now it's big, and you contrast that to the moments when we gradually build up or fade out into these ideas, you'll probably find some stuff that lines up with the lyrics rather well. They seem to be a band that has a lot of thoughts about how to tie their music into their lyrics. And while it's not always consistent, I do remember having some issue finding the thread between the two on, was it Circles of Hell? Oh, you know what? And Do You Feel... I think both of the opening tracks I felt were kind of disjointed thematically, but overall through the rest of this album, I found really strong synergy between the musical and the lyrical themes. So like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if you could find some meaning as to when they do harsh transitions and when they do smooth transitions. All right, lyrics. I'm going to need some help on this one. Maybe I'll talk myself into some sort of understanding that occasionally happens. But as of right now, I don't think I have a strong grasp on this. It is about being in a relationship, which seems to be a unique lyrical theme, since most of the songs, at least from the perspective I've got from them, is about wanting to be in a relationship. But here it says, the phantom of your heart creeps around like a shadow cast on the ground. I was possessed, siphoned your love like a demon. I was obsessed, trying to strangle the feeling. Now, I'm not too sure about the idea of phantom of the heart creeping around, but the idea of feeling possessed and siphoning someone's love makes it feel like our narrator believes that the other person's too good for them. They're taking all of this love from the other person and not returning anything. They're siphoning this energy. It says that I was obsessed with this relationship. That's not healthy. That's not a good word to use for a lot of things, but definitely not your love for somebody or the way that you feel about somebody. It says the stain of your love soils all. And this is where the beginning of my confusion stems, because the phantom of the heart creeping thing, still not too sure about that, but generally he seems to be head over heels about this person. But the self-pity kicks in, and they're like, they deserve someone better than you. That's where the siphoning part comes in. But then the use of the word staining. The stain of your love soils all, like a chemical causes to dissolve. Usually not the types of words you would use about someone who you're infatuated with. It says you had confessed in the words you speak while you're dreaming. I awoke and dressed, started to dream about leaving. So they heard them sleep talking, presumably about someone else, something that made them feel even smaller. And maybe this is where the staining comes from. They thought they had a good thing, but they didn't. The relationship wasn't stable or strong, which I could have told you from the idea that you felt you were siphoning your love, but whatever. The final stanza says, moving to keep thinking about anything. When I'm feeling weak, lesser than nothing, I'll try to keep thoughts from my mind, and so I will hide someplace you'll never find. So they did end up leaving. Went somewhere else, And they try to keep their mind active because idle minds open up thoughts, and the thoughts, as we've seen throughout most of this album, is negative. I'm not saying this is a concept album. This could be a bunch of isolated incidents. It could be different people in every song that are all having similar issues with their life. But thematically, this album has focused on how the brain, the mind, can be just as destructive as the people around us, or as the actions we make, that we can be our own worst enemy. So they say they keep active so they don't have to think about things. I feel like I'm missing a lot of information here to figure out what exactly happened, because it's got to be more than a literal sleep talking. But also, this person doesn't seem to be in the best mindset to have a healthy idea of themselves. So I suppose that even the littlest thing can set them off. But I'll tell you, man, if someone was sleep talking bad about me, I don't know that my first idea would be, I'm leaving in the middle of the night. But I suppose that's where I have a very different experience with the narrator of this song. But unlike the other tracks where I find that I can at least be sympathetic, if not a little empathetic of some of the situations, this one I'm just very disconnected from, and it makes it difficult for me to really catch on to what's being stated, because I don't get it, to be totally honest. It's an interesting track lyrically, and it's kind of all over the place. Its relationship to ideas shifts from stanza to stanza. The motivations of the narrator doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm a little lost on it. Maybe if you have a better interpretation, let me know. I'm all ears. Toss that stuff in the comment section. I don't know. As much as I love the ending to this track and the pain of the lyrics of running away from someone whose love you're so infatuated with that you feel you're siphoning it from them, that you're obsessed with them to lose them, and it's an action you made to actively leave them. Ooh, that's an interesting turn. Anyways, that pain, palpable in the guitar. Love it. A lot of this album's been about inaction. Missing opportunities. This is about having an opportunity and taking the action to remove yourself from it. Finally making a decision to do something, but it's one that harms you. In a sense, I'm still like, maybe it doesn't. If the other person literally doesn't love them the way that they love the other person, yeah, that's an imbalanced relationship. Maybe you can talk your way through that. Maybe you can get couples counseling, but maybe you can't. Maybe it is best for you to leave if there's any sort of resentment in the relationship. But I can't come to that conclusion without more information than she sleep talked bad about me. It just doesn't click with me, man. But I do think it's interesting that we finally have a song about making a decision, and it is one that actively brings emotional pain to the person. So that's a nice parallel across all these tracks to kind of bring in here towards the end of the album. All right, a short track followed by longest one on the album. Let's check out the next song, Crush. So the same chord on the guitars, but our pedal note changes, changing the harmonic information. The pedal note is coming from the bass. very stagnant. It's sort of a neutral dreariness. And then that grip came in. The bent guitar lines. Very bluesy, very country. Where the crush part comes in. Interesting. That one ran right up to the end. I honestly thought it was going to transition into the next track, and it doesn't. There's a harsh stop and then an inhale. Presumably, we're going into big moments at the beginning of the next track. I don't. There's not a lot to say about this one. It's one idea. In fact, it's one chord, in a sense. The guitar off to the left is just playing one chord. Chord shaping might even be an arpeggiation, actually. Anyways, we're getting some lower notes, some higher notes, some middle notes, and kind of up and down the chord, shaping it out. The bass changes notes, though. This gives us a bit of our harmonic progression as the root tone is moving while the notes above it aren't. It does change the harmonic information. It does give us harmonic direction and movement. And it is what gives us our chord progression, even if 75% of the notes never progress anywhere. Alongside that, we have very straightforward drumming. We have the vocal melody, and over here, every once in a while, we get these really twangy, bent guitar tones. Very country sounding thing going on there. That's the whole song. Save for like 3% of it. We hit a really angry point at one time, and then that was that. That never came back. It's very focused, very singular in execution. It creates this dreary sound that's sort of neutral, somber, and just runs with it. There's not really much exploration to it. The only modification to it really is the bent guitar notes coming in, just kind of sliding into a lower or a higher note. Very bluesy, very, very twangy. But as far as I can tell, is there a verse chorus structure in here? Because musically it is all the same all the time. I don't know. But there's not much to say about this one. It just kind of feels neutral, somber, and it does its thing. So, lyrics. I don't like this song lyrically. Now, granted, it's also I'm not a big fan of it musically given its singular focus, but lyrically, it's not great. And I'm not talking about vocabulary or rhyme scheme or complexity. The themes, the topics are kind of The kids these days say it's giving the ick, and yeah, this gives me the ick. I'm going to start in the chorus, and then we're going to hit the ending, and then we'll start from the beginning. And I think that's going to put things in order that really says why this isn't a great song, at least from my perspective. The chorus says, I don't mind feeling lonely because we cut ties and you don't owe me. But sometimes I wish you were in my life. Okay, that's not too bad. We were together. We cut ties. You don't owe me anything. But sometimes I miss you, right? I can get behind that. I don't think that's too bad. Second time, I won't call all your homies because we don't talk and they don't know me. Okay. I mean, that's a respectable thing to do, not call up someone's friends and try to figure out where that person's at or what they're doing or what they're up to these days, especially when you're trying to, or especially when we're talking about an ex here. Yeah, that's a respectable thing. Don't do that. But also don't bring it up. Okay. Not necessarily a red flag, but maybe a yellow one. We get to the chorus. It says, every single night I dream about you. Played over and over and over, or sung over and over and over again. This seems to run contrary to, I don't mind feeling lonely, but sometimes I wish you were in my life. If you're thinking about him every single night, that seems a little bit more obsessive. But here's where everything really starts to get complicated, because if this was just somebody singing about someone from their past and missing them and like, dude, I really lost an opportunity there. This person was great and I loved them in my life. I wish they were still in my life. Like, okay, you just make a song about that. But the end of the song states, I called to say I'm sorry. I miss you and I wish you'd call me back. So this entire song, presumably, is a voicemail. Let's head to verse 1. Every single day I fantasize different ways my body could die, and I would kill myself completely out of spite. I wouldn't be around to watch my friends cry. You're just putting this in a voicemail to an ex. And in the very next stanza, you're going to say, I kind of wish you were still in my life. No, buddy, this is bad. This is emotional abuse right here, emotional manipulation. This is not cool. It's really interesting because I think generally this album has been fine. Lyrically, it's been an album that seems to be about what it's like to deal with depression, having depression complicate your life, having you missed opportunities because of depression, and just kind of dealing with the pain and the regret that's all been from this thing. I'm on board with all that. You know, if that's what you got to do to get through it, go for it. This one feels really not cool though. Even if it wasn't wrapped up at the end or recontextualized to be a voicemail, I still don't think that a song about missing people or missing a specific person that they were great in your life, you wish they were still around. I don't think starting the track off, and then let me double down on this, never bringing it back up, but starting off this song with, yeah, dude, suicide. That would be kind of neat. I don't, it feels very out of place. Verse 2, every single day I'm feeling blue. I sit around with nothing to do. Voices in my room remind me I just want to know what you've been up to. Okay, that's fine. That's cool. Verse 3, I found love within myself. You found whatever in someone else. Well, now you're diminishing their agency in their own life. That's not cool, dude. It says, I threw away your pictures that I smashed on the shelf, only did it for my mental health. On the one hand, that's good. Removing things from your past that give you pain. or that bring pain to you. On the other hand, the violent outburst probably isn't a great thing that you want to include in the voicemail of the person you want to get back with. And then it says, if you were a stranger on the street, would you even look at me? Would you even recognize me? Would you have a clue that every single night I dream about you? And now that's where it begins to feel a little obsessive. I don't know, dude. There's a couple of fine lines in here. But I think generally just keeps veering off into this red flag territory, and it's not resonating with me at all. I'm not digging this. And you're free to disagree with me. Let me know if I'm just reading this from a very rough perspective and you're like, nah, dude, it's supposed to be read from this angle. But as far as I can tell, the rest of this album is fine lyrically. Not necessarily lyrics I like to listen to all the time, but I think as a work of art, it's done a great job of bringing attention to the ways that depression can influence someone's life, not just the feeling of it, but how it literally impacts your opportunities, and possibly is even an outlet for the artists to express themselves and to get this stuff out of themselves, and maybe that helps them deal with things. I don't know. This one follows along with several of these themes: missed opportunities, feeling blue. It does it in a not cool way. And I would really enjoy this album without it. I don't think it adds much to the album musically. It's not adding anything lyrically. This should have been cut 100%. Let's wrap up this album. That is a very sour taste to leave in my mouth coming up to the finale. New Hell, 10 minutes long. We got the longest track on the album here. Let's dive in.
We went down to Houston Christmas Eve. You looked through me. You pulled out my insides with your teeth. Found me safe.
Interesting how loud that snare is on this track. Has it been like that this whole album? It's rather balanced when the vocals are in, but when they're not, it pierces. Sorry for bringing that up if you can't unhear it now. There's almost like grunginess. Those two chords focused on over and over. Very cool. That brightness over here, that changed it all. It's interesting though that shoegaze is like grunge with a little bit of brightness to it. Or it can be achieved that way anyways. This start and stop is not really working for me though. Okay, we're building now. We have an acoustic guitar over here. Not the constant moving one, but there's a chirping, a rhythmic percussive thing down here. Yeah, dude, I think that's cool. Two different kinds of heavy distorted electric guitars and an acoustic underneath it. As wall of sound as this is, it's very floaty. Very smooth. Is that a harsh vocal under all of that? There's two cleans on top, but there's a compression under that too, of white noise. This one melody though that the vocals have been doing for multiple minutes now. This is what I was afraid track 4 was going to be. That the length was just going to be the one idea dragged out. An interesting amount of noise and a new guitar line over here. I like this guitar tone as a lead instrument. We got a bluesy guitar thing over here. I'm not digging this lead line though. I think I'd much rather prefer a solo melody over this focus on atmosphere. I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that I fully believe that should be the peak of the album, and it never hits a high point. It just is what the song has been. It really was a moment to elevate.
You are my bad dream.
I do like this though. I'm going to assume that all these layers were present in the last section too and was part of the wall of sounds. And it's kind of neat getting to hear the parts that are kind of drowned out by the white noise of the compression and the distortion. Yeah, that's going to be a no for me. Strain wasn't a good album closer, but I do think that was the last track that I enjoyed off of this album. And Strain did have a great outro, but it's a good outro for a song, not for an album. I really feel like New Hell had the chops, it had the foundation for it. It just never went for the ending. It never quite hit that moment. And I'm sure people are going to feel differently about that. This is definitely a subjective take here. I know I've spoken a lot objectively about this album, but this is my opinion here. It just doesn't feel like a finale. This feels like it could be the end of any song on the album. The fade out is longer than anything they've done though, and I suppose that gives it a little bit more grandioseness to it. But I don't know, it just never quite feels like we ever hit an album-wide climax. In fact, this song doesn't feel like it climaxed at all. Never really hit an emotional or energy intensity peak. A lot of that's because once we hit the 3-minute mark, the song is just one idea for the rest of the song. And it's kind of hard to maintain that energy for such a long amount of time. And it's why the contrast and the dynamic elements of this album have worked so well, of why every time we had a heavy part come in, it had impact and weight to it. Because quite frequently it was contrasted with a lighter, less layered, quieter section preceding it. It's why those quieter sections feel calming or serene or isolating or intimate as they do, because they're frequently juxtaposed by walls of sounds. It is the contrast that sells these moments, and we do have a little bit of that contrast at the beginning of the track. But once we hit that high energy, that's it. Assuming that we can call this a 10, which I don't think so. Album-wide, I think we have seen more impactful, more intense moments on this album. Still though, assuming we'll call this a 10, we stay with it for so long it becomes the norm. It dips down to a 5. It's just the way the song is. You can't go above it. We're at a 10. You can't go above a 10, but it just doesn't have the impact of a 10 anymore. Unfortunately for me, it loses that impact, that luster that strength long before we reach the height of the song. I'm going to assume that's where the lyrics wrap up and the guitar takes the center stage there. This to me should be the most impactful point of the track, and it's by here that I've grown quite tired of this concept. It feels like a low now, or a mid at best, and it just ends up feeling quite anticlimactic to wrap the track up on that. Sorry, to wrap the album up on that. But also, this is exactly what I was fearful of with You're Gonna Hate What You've Done. Because tracks 1 and 2 were rather focused. They had some variety. We had bridges in them. We had some guitar solos, but also shoegaze can be very one idea. And it was a welcome surprise. A nice slow burn with some phenomenal soloing in it, a nice narrative to go through it. Definitely, in fact, I kind of wish New Hell was more like it. Not necessarily in the constantly evolving composition. I don't think we needed to do that, but the general feeling of growth throughout. To reach a peak. The end of You're Gonna Hate What You've Done is a peak. It probably is one of the highest peaks of the album. It's strange that that's in the middle of the album. I don't know. It's strangely paced here at the end. I didn't enjoy this one with Crush preceding it. It just isn't a really strong end to an album. Strain is still... Strain's ending, if that had been a little stronger, maybe even push that feeling of pain just a little bit further. I don't know if it's a great way to wrap the album up thematically. I don't know what New Hell's doing lyrically. We'll tap into that in a little bit, but I mean, that's a way to go out on a high note. I had nothing but praise for Strain's finale, and I've pretty much had nothing but mid to negative comments to make about Crush and New Hell. So I don't know, does anyone agree with me, or am I alone on this? How do you feel about the final quarter of this album? I think if Crush and New Hell had been in the middle of the album, I would be more forgiving of them. In fact, Crush, if that had been around tracks 5 or 6 where we were really focusing on more simpler composition, I definitely wouldn't have thought twice about the simple composition of it, but it was the penultimate track that gives it a little bit more weight. New Hell, there's just nowhere to put it though. You can't put it too close to We're Gonna Hate What You've Done. You're Gonna Hate What You've Done because you got your 2 long tracks close to each other. That's just not gonna work. But it doesn't work at the end either. In fact, maybe, now lyrically, this might not work, but if we had switched You're Gonna Hate What You've Done and New Hell, well, no, because then entertainment is gonna be diminished. It really works coming off of You're Gonna Hate What You've Done. Yes, I don't know, man. I don't know. Again, I think a couple of little tweaks for New Hell would elevate it. The guitar at the end, give it a solo. Make it elevate the section. Lean into different emotional elements. If the lyrics go towards positivity, uplift the song. If the lyrics are still focusing on negative aspects, bring it crashing down, bring extra weight and grit to it. Anything else other than just playing those 3 notes and being lost in the wall of sound would have amplified the ending. There's always the chance that this is what was intended. Not to have a peak, not to have a feeling of finality. Simply just the end of the album ends on a little bit of mundanity. Not mundane overall, but certainly a rather standard sound for the album. The ending doesn't stand out very well against the other tracks, and maybe that's purpose-built. Maybe the album is about how things don't have an ending or a nice way of getting wrapped up, that they just kind of keep going. In which case, perfect thematic synergy there. So I always try to keep that in mind too, that what I want musically doesn't always match up with thematic intentions. And so while maybe I don't like the musical side of things, I can appreciate the artistic side and what their goals were with this art. But yeah, just a lot of repetition here, a lot of simple ideas. And I'll tell you, dude, that repeated rhythmic phrase in the middle, that was kind of annoying. And then to run with that for the rest of the lyrics, just keeping this one phrase over and over, it's it's one of those things where when you hear one thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, it like really gets on your nerves. Yeah, that it's just, I don't know. I don't want to get too harsh on it. So I think I'm just going to move into lyrics here, but I really have had not much but praise for this album and this ending. I think I'm going to need some help on these lyrics. It says, we went down to Houston Christmas Eve and you looked through me and you pulled out my insides with your teeth and found receipts. Okay. A bit grotesque, but it definitely gets the image across. It's about being completely seen, being completely vulnerable, and maybe even a bit of forced vulnerability. The idea not of purposefully showing your insides to someone, but having them rip them out of you. The idea of finding receipts as well, to me, now I'm not always on the up and up with modern vernacular, so maybe I've inferred the wrong thing here, but usually receipts come up in a negative fashion. It's the idea that someone lied and you brought the receipts. You have the counter to what they stated. I've never heard the phrase, I've got receipts, in a positive way. It's always a way to disprove something that's been done. So, assuming that that's what's going on here, we have someone who found all the secrets of our narrator and is exposing them. Says, you were looking for something. Sounds like all the rest I knew who came and left with nothing. She likes my conscience, silent like the grave. Well, ain't that something? So this other person liked our narrator because they didn't have a conscience, any moral compass, but despite all that, they left with nothing, even though they were looking for something. Now, I'm reading this in the perspective against the first stanza, that they opened our narrator up and found a bunch of dirty secrets. They got receipts now. But if they left with nothing, is that to imply that they were hoping the relationship led to something and instead they left by themselves? That the relationship eventually ended. But then it says that she likes my conscience, not she's liked. So, I don't know. I'm not capturing the time frame of all of this. Anyways, we completely forget about that girl and we look at a very different point here. It says, I drove to Chicago in my sleep. In a dream, I told all my friends that we'd still speak, but it's been 15 weeks and now they're through with me. Part of this, that's just introvert behavior, man. It is tough to pick up the phone and keep relationships going, especially when they're long distance. I have that problem myself. All the friends that I had, and I still talk to most of them, but all the friends I had in middle school and high school, they've all moved. None of us live in the same city anymore. And so it's all long distance. It's all, like voice chat calls and text messaging. But it's very rare too. Well, we're all introverts, so none of us really call each other just to chat. That's what texting's for. But I fully get this. that when everybody sort of separates, it's tough to keep those relationships alive. Going to school, seeing these people every day, or if they're your work friends, you'll see them, every day at your job or whatever. It's a lot easier to keep those relationships alive when it's kind of forced. Not that you're forcing the relationships to exist, but you're forced to meet in person. It's a lot easier to work with that. But when you're all split up, it's real effort to pick up the phone and talk to people, especially with how busy lives can get as you move into adulthood. I get this stanza. Where did the stanza come from, though? What is it engaging thematically with in parallel to what we were talking about? Then it says, in the land where the gods are dead, I can still hear their stations as the radio towers bend to their voices replaying, and they speak through the static now just like ghosts in their cages while the children still lie awake and the faithless are praying. I don't know why I did that in one breath. Now the voices playing through static in the land of dead gods. This album reached an interesting metaphorical height here that hasn't really been explored much on this album. It's been a rather straightforward lyrically album. But I imagine this might have to do with the voices one hears when they think to themselves, when they're within their own minds. I'm not necessarily saying that this person hears voices, but simply that it's their inside voice. The voice that they speak to themselves with. It's the narrative in their head. It says the gods are dead here. That they still speak through static. And I wonder if maybe this is a point of healing, or at least that's what I thought originally. What if the voices that put himself down, where the self-pity comes from, became silent one day? Not necessarily healing the depression, but certainly beginning to heal from it? I don't know, though. It's a very vague idea that's, once again, gone. We were talking about a girl that we were with, and then we moved on to friends, and now we have the gods who speak through static. And now we're going to move on to something else here. I lose my thoughts and my feelings, my words, and my patience. Did you give up yet? Did you feel nothing? Where is the daylight? Where is the darkness? Where are my friends? Where is the silence? We have the isolation again. Is this the last dance? Is this the real thing? Is this a new hell? Are you a bad dream? Here comes the last dance. Here comes the real thing. Here comes a new hell. You are my bad dream. Who? You can't pull up the second person you after we have talked about 3 different people here. Friends, an ex, dead gods. Who is the bad dream? Oh, even the self. 4 distinct people have been brought up here. By last dance and real thing, is this an implication of death? After saying, is this the last dance? He says, here comes the last dance. Does that imply that death has finally come for our person? They've already flirted with suicide. They think about it often. It's been brought up in a few tracks here. I don't know. It certainly is thematically similar to some of the other tracks lyrically, but it decides, instead of focusing on any one particular instance across this album, there have been love. There has been friendship. There has been suicide and general pain and depression. There's been missed opportunities. we're just going to capture all of that and stuff it into one song and bounce between ideas rapidly. At least that's what I get from it. It is rather unfocused, which I find incredibly frustrating as it runs perpendicular to the track, which is incredibly focused. Many of the other songs, well, some of the other songs on this album, I think would have fit, well, the style of those songs would have fit the lyrics better. The simple idea of jumping between these ideas, but instead it's almost as if the mind is hyper-focused on everything that's been gone, everything that's been missed, everything that this album has touched on, and it's just running through all of them back to back, all the bad things that have happened. My love left me. My friends left me. Even the voices that I talk to in my mind have left me. I have an empty internal dialogue now. It's just static. As the paragraph states, the second to last, I lose my thoughts and my feelings. Total apathy here. Did you give up? Oh, did you? I read that as, did you give up on me? I wonder if he's talking to someone else. Maybe someone they knew who committed suicide. Did you give up? Did you feel nothing? You went through the same things I did. I wonder how you felt in this moment. I don't know. It's incredibly vague, though. That's the problem here. And I'm not entirely sure that the heavy use of metaphor throughout does it any service. But I will appreciate the fact that they tried for something a bit larger here. Musically, I don't think it really hit that peak, but lyrically, I think it is. It's at least attempting to hit a highlight on the track, kind of trying to wrap everything up and come to some sort of conclusive finality to it. But I have no idea what it's trying to ultimately do. I can just grasp at little ideas that do click with me. These are my thoughts then on Greet Death's New Hell. I've had a couple of questions throughout, particularly song emotions, and I think two songs gave me some tough times with the lyrics. This one included. Do you have a different perspective on any of that? I'm totally open. Give me your perspective, your opinions, your take on any of that. How do you read this album? What does it mean to you? Put all of that and any other thoughts you might have into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.